Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first ever annual Newspaper of the Year debate. Let's present our two newspapers. First, let's give a brief history though. On the left wing, founded in 1821 as a local paper replacing the radical Manchester Observer, it was known as the Manchester Guardian until 1959. Owned by the Guardian Media Group and often associated with trendy liberalism and political correctness, The Guardian. And on the right wing, first published in May 1896 by Lord Northcliffe, the United Kingdom's second best-selling daily newspaper after The Sun, with strong traditional views and a strong dislike for any form of political correctness, The Daily Mail!
Two representatives are going to debate, and then the audience will have a final say on which newspaper is the best. So let's begin.
The Guardian uses a slab serif typeface known as the Guardian Egyptian. It was an essential element in the Guardian's move to the Berliner format and is part of the Guardian font family. The font has a gentle and modern appearance with a mixture of both white and blue font color, which creates a relaxed, refreshing outlook. It is also noticeable that the font masthead is not capitalized, even the article "the" is written in minuscule. I think it does not need to have bold letters to attract readers, unlike some newspapers, and it actually has confidence in its readers and itself, with an average issue readership of 1,027,000 and an average daily sale of 187,000. The Guardian is also not written as two separate words, but rather forms one word, The Guardian, knowing that "the" is used for definite and specific nouns, symbolizing the newspaper to be distinctive and unique.
Well, one thing the Daily Mail possesses that the Guardian does not, from comparing the two mastheads, is imagination.
Why would you need imagination in writing news?
Imagination is how to report news in an interesting and sensational way, with humour and colloquial language to grab the reader's attention, which from the statistics, obviously working at the Daily Mail, has an average daily readership of approximately 3.951 million, 6 copies, placing it well ahead of The Guardian. It uses a more unique font, which is similar to the English town font, but not to match it identically, and it has a hand-drawn logo. That fact is more unique and it cannot be purchased, not only shows creativity, but also shows the determination it has to be distinctive. It gives the readers an appearance of being one-of-a-kind newspaper, and also because the font is very traditional, it appears more sophisticated with its crest, which symbolises British heritage.
It's quite interesting you think the Daily Mail is more sophisticated, because looking at the first headline at the top of the newspaper, "Can any wife fancy a man who becomes a house husband?" uses a mocking tone, reporting this story with a quite comic picture of a middle-aged man wearing an apron to portray that a man becoming a house husband is perhaps, in the opinion of the Daily Mail, ridiculous. The use of the word "any" emphasizes on the fact that a house husband is unappealing to all women in general, which is quite sexist in my opinion, because men can be house husbands too, right?
Notice that the sentence is a question. Can any wife fancy a man who becomes a household husband? The Daily Mail does not conclude that men cannot become household husbands, but leaves it open to the opinion of the public. The Daily Mail supplies news to the people with which they can relate to. The picture of the man in the apron is merely a visual representation of people to engage with.
It also focuses on news concerning the people, but from a political viewpoint. Looking at the headline, "Britain's role in Yemen attacks under scrutiny," shows interest in Britain's foreign affairs. It also shows criticism because of the word scrutiny. Whatever part they had in the Yemen attacks is being carefully examined, and because this is in the front page lead, shows that The Guardian is very much concerned with international news, especially when UK is involved, and it does not necessarily support the actions of the government or military, but is always in support of the people, hence living up to its name. The tone used is very factual and strict. It states that Britain has been fertile about its role in the bombing campaign, meaning they have been avoiding attention due to guilt. This further emphasizes on the fact that they are being criticized by The Guardian. The Guardian has never been afraid to stand on the social, political, or economic beliefs that it fights to ensure for all UK citizens. Either is it ashamed to hold firm to its social beliefs despite criticism from other leading daily newspapers.
The Mail focuses on political news as well.
Good point. It is evident by looking at the second and most obvious headline in the Daily Mail. who say the statement made in the headlines would give readers the impression that the Daily Mail are against the idea of taking in migrants, as the statement is not quoted to be known as David Cameron, but rather at the first glance seems to be a statement that the Daily Mail agrees with and wants to identify with. What is your response to this?
Not all statements have to be quoted to be represented as in other individuals. Not all statements have to be quoted to be represented as in other individuals. It is obvious that it belongs to David Cameron, as it states,
PM, why we must not take 3,000 migrant children.
and it continues to explain that the statement, by saying it would only encourage new influx. The paper goes on to state that the Prime Minister was under huge pressure. This statement evokes a bit of sympathy towards Cameron, and it is also obvious from the language used by the Daily Mail that they are generally in support of Cameron's ideas not to take these migrant children, and there will be thousands of youngsters to undertake dangerous boat journeys, showing that one of the reasons he is against Britain taking in all these children is because he seemingly cares about their safety, therefore showing he is compassionate. Also, the amount of refugees is emphasised, and with the use of number form of 3,000 instead of 3,000 written in letters, which is psychologically drawn to our attention and makes us a picture of the quantity of migrants as more they might actually be.
That does not change the fact that at a first glance it looks like a statement you want to connect with, and it takes more than 2/3 of the front page, intending to draw focus to it.
So the Daily Mail wants to attract potential buyers, but does not necessarily care who it attracts, as long as it is able to maintain its high readership. Is that a bad thing?
Oh no, and from looking at your average readers, it is obvious your style of writing as well as its context appeals to a typical Hyacinth bucket. Late middle age, middle England, middle class, conservative, wife never worked, scandalized by homosexuality and children outside marriage. Oh, and immigration, with which you seem quite negative about, while The Guardian, on the other hand, is a bit more open-minded, as you can see from the front page with the image of a young Syrian child placed on the right, taking up about 1/4 of the front page, and a caption on the top saying, "Not such a bad bunch," obviously making reference to David Cameron's rude statement about the refugees being a bunch of migrants. The aim of the picture is for readers to be able to connect and feel a bit sympathetic towards these refugees. There is constant repetition in the article of children or child, reminding the readers that they are quite young, and also, in contrast to the Daily Mail, it uses adjectives such as unaccompanied and vulnerable to also achieve the same goal as the picture, which is to allow readers to feel sympathetic towards these young, unfortunate children, reminding us that they are traveling without their parents and so must be frightened. This sort of news is one that should evoke sympathy from people with children of their own. Also, unlike the Daily Mail, the article focuses on why the children need to be taken in, and not how it would affect Britain, but how, if they are not taken in, might be subjected to human trafficking or cheap labour. The article also criticizes Cameron by stating that he was accused of using inflammatory language, meaning that his speech aroused anger in the public. It also states that PM's comment on Calais refugees provokes dismay, showing that his statement was completely frowned upon by a mass number of people. So as you can see, we have a much more accepting view towards the migrants and are not as closed off and ignorant as the Daily Mail.
Fair point. But don't you think overall the front page of the Daily Mail is more appealing than the Guardian?
I definitely think that. At least we are not a political talk with no action. No one wants to read newspapers with so many texts and information. All you need is a sensational headline, a brief summary of what happened, and images of visual effect.
It is true that most people do indulge in these kind of newspapers, but at least for the people who want to gain more information about a story than the one-sided cynical opinion of the Daily Mail and others of its kind, they would choose newspapers that hold more information.
You claim that your paper gives more information, yet looking at the story of the boy murdered, which appears on both newspapers, it seems that the Daily Mail holds more information than the Guardian.
What the Daily Mail has overanalyzed description on the feelings of everyone involved rather than the facts on what happened. People don't need to be bombarded with too much emotional details, they just need facts.
It's nice to see what the Guardian pays more attention to. It is obvious that the Guardian thinks that everyday, average news about average people is not as important as international news.
Let's move on. So what can you tell us from the way the story is presented in each newspaper?
From the headline, which has bold letters and really engaging title to grab readers' attention, the use of possessive expression, "my son," plays with the heartstrings of the people, especially mothers, who can relate. This uses very exaggerated adjectives such as vicious and taunting, which plays the reader's emotions because the fact that the killer is taunting her makes us feel more hatred towards him because it shows he is not at all remorseful for what he did, and it makes the readers feel more sympathy towards the mothers.
Well, the Guardian's headline of this story is completely presented differently. It reads, "Jailed killer of boy, 14, posting about it online." The use of commas gives it a monosyllabic tone. No emphatic words used to sensationalize the headlines. It provides us with the age of the boy, which the Daily Mail does not, so a point for me. But the essence of this is not to make readers feel any emotional connection, but just to provide us with information. Well, The Guardian uses more text and less pictures in the article. As you can see, we only have one picture, which doesn't even take up to a quarter of the page. Actually, from the whole layout, one would think that the picture of the man and woman are related to the story. But actually, they are as separate as that picture is for the story about Damian Lewis, who attended a school's 50th anniversary. I think because the story affects more people and has a famous figure, people will be more inclined to look at the picture more than the picture of an ordinary citizen.
Don't you think it would have been wiser to have a picture of the killer for more information?
Not really, because the article states that the killer was jailed for life. So, what are the chances you would ever encounter him? Honestly, a picture of the killer is just unnecessary and a complete waste of ink.
And was a picture of the boy and his mother also a waste of ink? Well, as for the Daily Mail, we have two pictures, both victim and predator, as he is described in the article. Both these pictures shown gives audience visual representation and allows them to draw more emotive feelings from it. For example, looking at the picture of the predator from the angle it was taken at, with his straight-faced look and from the look in his eyes, it just gives him the dangerous appearance. There is also a picture of the victim and his mother, and the picture is clearly intended to draw sympathy from the readers because you have them both looking very happy with big smiles. Especially the mother, and the fact that they placed it right next to the headline just reminds the reader that the happiness is gone. Oh, caption under pictures show what position the people are in the case of the murder of the young boy. Also to compare and contrast the two boys. This shows his cynical side. It also states that the killer lured the victim, which connects the predator part and has a sexual connotation, which gives the reader a disgusted feeling. The first part of the story tells us how the killer tried to blame the death of the son on the mother, and it states that he was falsely portrayed as a pedophile. When the mother of the victim describes the murderer on this situation, the use of he after every sentence shows that it's attacking him and that it's very assertive. The gradual intensity of the tone betrays that the mother is shooting bullets in terms of her acknowledgement or experience. Also, the extract shows that the killer is trying to bring the mother down and make her look like she's the one to blame as well.
Well, the article states that the boy was murdered after being groomed online. The word groomed shows that the killer skillfully prepared the boy online, highlighting how dangerous online interaction can be. We are also given the location of the murder, and it states that Bednar admired the older man for his computer skills. It portrays the killer to be much older than he really is by stating the older man, although the age difference between them is a good 6 years. I think the aim of this is to justify why they described him as a pedophile, even though in one of the letters he posted online, the killer, he claimed that he was not a sinister pedophile, obviously making reference to the words used to describe him in the media. I also think that the fact the paper includes the killer's comment when he says, "My actions do not fit the profile that has been created by the media and the family," even though it is clear to the readers that the label pedophile actually describes him, shows how ignorant the killer is and how unrepentant he is towards the crime he committed. They also make use of the word purporting when mentioning how the killer had managed to post letters about the victim. The use of this verb shows that, in the opinion of the editor, the letters may not have been from the killer and that there are other people involved. This point is further proven when the editor goes on to state that prison authorities undertook an extensive search of the killer's cell, and after the first letter was posted, and no electronic devices were found. The word extensive shows the level of care and thoroughness put into the search, therefore supporting the idea that there might be other people involved. The language used is clear and concise, and we have some comments made by the mother on the situation, although we do not delve into her feelings. She, the mother, states that the letters are genuine and that she had contact with the killer when he was gaming, and she feels that he speaks the same way he writes. So, although the article presents us with information on why we should believe the letters are not from the killer, it also presents us with information as to why we should believe it is. So, ultimately, it is left to the reader to decide whether or not the letters are genuine or not.
Very interesting that the two newspapers with the same story are able to present in two completely different ways. Which brings me to my final question of this debate. Would you both agree that the newspapers and the use of languages are able to affect our perception of the world?
Yes, of course. I think newspapers seek a broad audience for a typically narrow and often biased message that's typically embedded in entertainment or useful information.
Correction, the Daily Mail does that. But to be frank, newspapers don't really report news, but actually report their version of the news, and the writers tend to convey the attitude to what they are describing.
Very true. And they also use language to manipulate readers' emotions by emphasizing our particular words, right?
Right! And because these newspapers either tell the same story differently or just focus on particular stories that they feel are more important than others, they just give us an distorted view of the world in which we live. Okay, hold on. Right, and because these newspapers either tell the same story differently or just focus on particular stories that they feel are more important than others, they give us a distorted view of the world in which we live in.
And our perceptions would differ depending on what type of newspaper we read.